Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest. We want to transition to Dr. Paul Alexander, and we're so grateful, Dr. Paul, for you being able and willing to spend some time with us. The topic that you're going to speak to is so important, and we need it. So if you could jump in and share, that would be awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's going to be just a second here while I move some screens around. All right. Is that working?
Yeah.
All right. So good morning, everyone. I want to tell you how happy I am to be able to share with you today and let you know that I just appreciate what you guys are doing up there. Sean has been a friend for a long time. One of my pastors is on with us today. Joe Grana is on your screen, hiding in there somewhere. It's good to see Clark Tanner again. Clark was a board member here many years ago. So fortunately or unfortunately, I've had the privilege of speaking on this topic in our churches the last couple of years. And it all started with 3 pastors who took their own lives 2.5 years ago in Southern California. And the pastors in this area were rocked by that. The churches were rocked by it. A couple of the stories got picked up by national and even international press. And the question that was coming to the surface was, are our pastors okay? Are we taking good care of our pastors? And what can we do when we are depressed and discouraged? So I reached out to my pastor, Gene Apple. I go to Eastside Christian Church, a fairly well-known church. And I said, Gene and I are friends. I said, I've been working with pastors behind the scenes for years. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist and a college president, which is a really weird combination. But I said, I've been working with pastors. I have some research I've been doing. Do you want me to come share with the staff? That pilot presentation turned into about 18 different presentations across the country. And Joe Grana and I went on the road and spoke to 1,600 pastors, all prior to COVID. And we asked them their feelings about the 9 factors that you see on the screen before us, and asked them to rank them in terms of their personal experience with ministry and depressive factors in ministry. And the number one issue that popped up from the 1,600, towering above the other 8, was lack of true soul care. The 1,600 pastors, which is a really good sample size, said that they struggle with being able to take care of themselves. Now, is that a cause or is that an effect? Well, the answer is probably yes. It's both cause and effect. But you see highlighted there the top 3 answers: unresolved trauma and grief, and the feeling that programmatic success is all that matters. And this is all pre-COVID. So in my mind, you can just magnify most of these in a time of COVID and see that they've become exacerbated and even more intense. So my heart is your heart. My heart is, what can we do as a university to try to help, to bring a cup of cool water? And that's what I hope this morning is for you. Some of you were in the seminars that I shared in probably a year ago, a little over a year ago. Sean had me come up and speak a couple of times up in that area. But my experience with pastors over the years, and my own experience as a Christian leader, is we're all pretty aware of when we're not doing okay. We're all pretty aware as people helpers, right? There's a lot of insight. We're aware of what it feels like to feel broken. And the number one thing for most Christian leaders, as soon as we realize we're broken, my experience has been that we feel shame. There is somewhere in us a primitive, immature thought that says, I'm a Christian leader, I shouldn't be broken. And so we feel embarrassed and we feel shame over our own brokenness, usually followed by guilt. I start feeling guilty for the things I've said lately or not said, the things I've done or not done. And sometimes the guilt can come back from something we did years and years ago. It's almost irrational, the things that we start carrying around with us. And then this embarrassment, that who do I tell that I'm struggling with fill in the blank? That I'm struggling with lust, that I'm struggling with envy, that I'm feeling depressed, that I'm feeling resentful toward a staff member or an elder, or another church in the area. And then this critical question: how in the world am I possibly going to tell someone what I'm feeling? And I think this is a real dilemma for pastors. There is this wall around you guys that's different than my wall as a Christian educator. There's more freedom for me, right? There are more holes in the fence for me to talk to someone than there are for you guys to talk to people. So this becomes a very isolative experience. Combine that now with COVID, and we have a situation that is just super ripe for anxiety and depression. We're feeling a little broken. We're feeling a little isolated. We're feeling more stress. I'm not a huge spiritual warfare guy, but in my mind, Satan has an opportunity to just cull the herd one person by one person and just send us off to the side and just silence us. And we just end up hurting and lonely and embarrassed and afraid. And that isolation is wreaking havoc on us as Christian leaders. I've never talked to a more isolated group than I have the last year when I try to connect with trustees, with alums, with pastor friends. This is just incredibly isolative. So I was getting emotional looking at the start of your meeting just to see 23 people together for the right reasons to support one another. And you almost can't get too much of that right now. Now, you probably shouldn't do it every day. You might get a little tired of it, but this glue will save us. When we don't engage, we start to feel aloof and depressed. And my experience with leaders the last 12 months is that a lot of our marriages are really struggling because a lot of Christian leaders are really irritable at home. Like they're holding it together on work-related things, but they're going home and they are just wired to just snap, right? And super irritable. And then at some point, a lot of us act out. Because when we're under stress for a sustained period of time, we will find things that reduce that stress. Some of them are adaptive, some of them are maladaptive. The problem is, for pastors, when you choose something maladaptive, it goes straight to the top of the wheel and we immediately feel shame, which makes us feel guilty, which causes us to pull away, which makes us more depressed, which makes us more likely to act out. And this thing just keeps spiraling. The pastors I worked with over the years, I don't want to overstate this, but some of the more serious issues of shame and grief tied together have been with pastors as opposed to non-pastors. This extra layer of guilt that you feel when you're a Christian leader. So it's a time that's rife with isolation and the stress that comes from isolation, and then our own misgivings and awkwardness around our own brokenness. So if that plays out over time, we start to become this is a clinical word. I like this clinical word because it's so simple. We start to become dull, right? There's less life in us. We become flat. There's just not as much spark. And you look at people on Zoom calls. Oh my gosh, I filled in for one of our classes online the other day with undergrads, and it was a middle of the afternoon class, early afternoon class. 15 students came on, and they looked like they had all just awakened from a long winter's nap, and not in a good way. I mean, they looked exhausted. And I thought, oh, this is the beginning of class. How do we get through 90 minutes of this? Right? There's a dullness that comes from isolation. There's a dullness that comes from having to do too much on Zoom. And there's a dullness that comes from the hopelessness that this pandemic has been. I mean, it has just gone on and on and on and on and on. I said to a group of pastors a couple of weeks ago, and I saw more nodding than I thought I would. I said, one of the things we have to do as leaders in a pandemic is admit that not only has it been bad, it's been really bad. And not only has it been really bad, it's been awful to try to lead during this time. And let's just call it what it is. It's awful. And there were a lot of nods. And I thought, I don't think we've said that enough. As part of the lament of where we are, we have to recognize this has been awful. The other thing that you deal with that I don't have to deal with is you probably have people in your ears about when in the world are we going to reopen, and why are we going to reopen now? Why haven't we reopened? The spiritualizing around issues of law and rule and states' rights and disease, fantasy versus reality. My buddies that are pastors have been sharing with me their horror stories of what people have said to them about when you should open and how you should open. Now, I have a little bit of that stress from parents who want their kids out of their house and students that want to be around each other, but nothing like you guys have been getting, right? A buddy of mine's a pastor up in the Seattle area. He had a sweet little older woman come in, little saint in the church come in, screaming at him, wagging her finger in his face, saying, "You tell us to trust God, but you won't trust God to reopen." And he said, "I'm trying to keep us alive, Sally," whatever her name was. And she was threatening that she was going to leave the church over her insistence that they must trust God and open immediately, right? So you guys have that whole other level of, I'll just use the word irritant, another level of irritants. So I want to give you 3 very simple tools today, and I want you to prayerfully consider them the next few days. These are just 3 very, very simple tools. I've only got a few minutes left, so I'm gonna try to get as much bang for my buck as I can. They're easy to remember. I've spent a lot of time trying to come up with 3 very memorable, and I feel good about them. I'm going to keep them. You're the first ones to hear them, but I'm keeping them, right? You know how that is. I'm going to use these again. Number 1, when we are in the pit as Christian leaders, the first thing that I would encourage you to do is fall on your call, which means take a day, take a week, take a season away from your ministry and remind yourself of your call. Rehearse in your mind and in your spirit how and why God called you to do this work. A couple of days as a young president, I've had to fall on my call, a couple of really bad days, hit my knees and ask the Lord to remind me why I believe he put me in this position. Why has God put me here? Fall on your call. Number 2, you've got to call a friend. On your bad days, on your bad-ish days, you've got to get over your pride and call a friend. I've been in a rough spot the last few days, this normal stress. So right before the seminar, I reached out to my buddy Joe, who's a pastor up in Thousand Oaks, and I said, "Hey, man, do you have next Monday or Tuesday open? I'm going to drive up. Let's play golf." We'll ride in separate golf carts because we're both a little paranoid about COVID. But I'll be able to spend time with my friend Joe. I'll take a mental health day. Just having that on the books lifted my mood. Fall on your call a friend. Now, my encouragement to pastors always is make sure at least one of your phone a friend people doesn't work for the church, right? It's okay to have one person in the church, but you also need somebody outside the church for political reasons, right? So that's just my friendly political advice. And then the third one is actually based on a lot of research in the field of social psychology that says that there is an immediate lift in our self-esteem, self-confidence, and happiness when we do good work. When we do good work for another. When we become Jesus to a stranger. So fall on your call a friend, and then be a friend. So I've been praying a simple prayer lately, and that is just asking the Lord to put someone in my path that I can help. And it has been amazing how God has answered that prayer. God has put people into my path to be able to do simple things for. The other day I went to a gas station I don't ever go to. I looked down, and normally I get gas with a quarter tank left. I looked down and I was on fumes, right? Because that's, why not? COVID, whatever, right? And I went to a different gas station, and there trying to get gas was a little old man with a really broken down looking car with a look of panic on his face. So he couldn't get his car to start. He had the hood popped up. He didn't speak English, and I could tell he was struggling with the battery. So I went into this little mini mart. I bought him a set of jumpers. I helped him get his car going again. I'm getting emotional thinking about this. I just gave him the jumper cables, and the look on his face was just pure relief. And I thought, I got so much more out of helping a stranger than he possibly could have gotten by getting his car running again. The truth is, we can become so self-obsessed when we're hurting that we forget to pastor. And I think of the three, this may be the most profoundly simple thing to do when we're feeling discouraged, is to get out of our heads and reach out and help someone. Man, that's an emotional story. That was just a divine moment for me. Help that sweet little man who wanted to hug me. It's like, we're not hugging during COVID, but we'll high five. All right. So in the world of psychology, as a licensed therapist, one of the things I learned early on is when you tell someone to do something, more important than asking or telling them to do something is to ask them instead what's going to keep them from doing what you just asked them to do. So I just gave you 3 pieces of advice, right? Great. Seminar's over. Let's all no. The next question is, what's likely to stop you from doing 1, 2, and 3? So my simple question is, what's going to keep you from falling on your call and remembering why you do what you do? What's going to keep you from calling a friend? And what's going to keep you from being a friend? There's 2 ways to fight. Kung Fu is a force to force, hit to hit, right? That's one way to go. You just brute force, brute attack. But judo is a much more elegant style of fighting because it allows you to take the weight of the person coming toward you, pivot, and let them go by. What we're doing right now is judo. We're doing mental judo to realize there is resistance coming our way. And if we'll simply see what it is and pivot, it has a lot less power. So if I will admit that the resistance that I have to helping someone is probably my own selfish schedule, and my resistance I have to calling a friend is my own pride. I don't want to be the person that's broken. And my resistance to falling on my call is I don't know what. I don't know what the resistance is there. I'll have to think more about that. So just think for a minute, maybe even jot down, what is a logical piece of resistance around doing something that I know is going to be good for me? What is that catch, right? What's the hook that's keeping me from doing this? And then I want to ask you to just pick one job for yourself. I love the memes that have been going around lately of you had one job, right? On Sports Center, they show, the kicker that's supposed to only have one job and he misses the kick, and the holder that's supposed to hold the football and he bobbles it. And so I found this meme yesterday. I love this. The guy had one job just to paint the word stop, and it came out stop. Right. So pick one job, either thinking about your call, reaching out to a friend that loves you, or reaching out to someone in your church or on your street or in your house that just needs a little bit of help. Pick one. Pick one of those jobs and commit to it. I think the one that will give you the quickest lift is phone a friend. But you decide which of those is going to help you most. I want to close with a scripture, and then I think we might have a couple minutes for Q&A. I've sort of fallen in love lately with Psalm 18. It's not a psalm I knew well until just recently. But I want to read a few verses from Psalm 18 as a benediction for my part. Psalm 18:18. They came at me on the very day of my distress, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out to wide open spaces. He pulled me out safe because he's pleased with me. The Lord rewarded my righteousness. He restored me because my hands are clean, because I have kept the Lord's ways, and I haven't acted wickedly against my God. I love the first part there. They came at me in my distress, but the Lord was my support, and he brought me out to wide open spaces.
That was so brilliantly simple and helpful. I circled be a friend.
Simple is good, right? Simple is good.
It is so good, especially right now. The last thing any of us need is another complicated piece of our lives.
Right.
So thank you for making it simple. But I'm kind of curious, like if we wanted to go to work on maybe the more psychological side of our lives, if you could recommend a resource or a book or something like that that might help us to go, man, when it comes to building my resilience internally, what do you recommend?
So there's no one perfect book on that. There's a book on grit by Duckworth. That is an excellent book. It will ask lots of questions of yourself, about your tenacity, about your resilience, about the mental toughness that we need. Healing for Damaged Emotions by David Seamands is always a good general book for emotional health for Christian leaders. Healing for Damaged Emotions by David Seamands. There's also a biography, a compilation biography, Leadership During Turbulent Times by Goodwin. If you've not read that book, it's a survey of 4 U.S. presidents. There are themes of faith, though it is not a Christian book, but I think that there's a lot of value in looking at how Christian leaders have handled hard times. So that was an excellent read, Leadership During Turbulent Times. The Grit book I would recommend, Healing for Damaged Emotions, are both good resources.
Great. Very cool. Thank you. Anybody else? Do you have a question or even a specific circumstance that you'd love to bounce off Dr. Paul, or something that you're wondering right now related to how do we become?
And so I would add to that. Another thought would be, if you want to share, if we run out of questions, if somebody wants to share a discipline that you have used over the years when you have gotten discouraged, right? So that's simple, like a short thing that you have done, a discipline that allows you to keep going. Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Pete Scazzaro. Great. Any suggestion on how to recognize the emotional needs on staff of our teams? Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a common one, is how can I tell if my team is struggling or not? How can I tell if they're thriving or not? One thing to look at is absenteeism. If your staff has gone MIA, that's often an indicator that there's something going on. If they become more irritable, that's an indicator. The smaller the staff, the more easy it is to see because you're around each other more. But I would just get into the habit of asking more open-ended questions. How are you? How's your family? How are you doing? How are you doing really? How's the stress level at home? And then maybe once a quarter, just have a discussion around something like, how do we manage stress as leaders? I try not to use buzzwords like anxiety and depression because that can be off-putting. That can scare people. But stress seems to be a pretty good safe word that doesn't cause people to shut down. So just, once a quarter, just say, how are we all handling the stress of life and the stress of ministry? Again, there's a reluctance in Christian leaders. They don't want to admit, we don't want to get fired. So the main leader usually has to be a little bit transparent in order to get people talking. I don't think it's appropriate to say, here's everything about everything, but we have to be a little bit transparent. So my comment about I'm not a spiritual warfare guy means I don't think that all of our issues, emotional, psychological, and spiritual, are caused by Satan. I don't think Satan is behind every issue that we're encountering. What I do mean, though, is that anything we're encountering can be a foothold for Satan. So I'm not always looking at Satan as cause or causal. There are some Christian therapists that think everything that's gone wrong is Satan somehow. When I think sometimes it's nutrition, sometimes it's you just not being in control of yourself. So that's what I meant. I was a little flip when I said it. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense? Yeah. But I am convinced that right now Satan has got his neck on a lot of Christian leaders because of the isolation that we're all feeling. I do believe that.
I'm curious, Dr. Paul, if you could speak a little bit more to, I'm kind of, my mind went crazy when you started talking about how we could help our teams. And Steve, thanks for that great question. How we could help our teams to experience some of what we just experienced with this kind of care. Do you have, I like the questions and I like the idea of getting together quarterly to do something. Can you help us think through maybe a little more robustly, like, What does that really look like?
One of the things that I think would really be nice is if we had a pastor visitation circuit where we're in an area like you guys are that's somewhat close to one another, is take turns going to each other's churches and just pastoring the staff. Every now and then, just drive down the road and pray for the other team. There's something healing about having an outsider come in and pray for us. There's something really special about that, to come in and put a hand on a shoulder and pray for a team. Think of the kingdom lift of us taking care of each other. There's value in that, and there's also some safety in that. So that would be one. And then just as the leader of my cabinet, president's cabinet, probably every third or fourth meeting, I'll just go around at the end of cabinet and single each vice president out and tell them something I appreciate about them or something that I know that they've been working really hard on, and just tell them I appreciate that. And it's amazing how just a little bit of focused attention brings tremendous relief for us. Same thing when my boss, the chairman of the board, recognizes hard work during a hard time. Man, that means a lot to me. I feel seen. I feel supported.
Those are fantastic. Thank you. We've got 2 more minutes. If somebody has a question, we'd love to hear it and be able to walk through it.
So somebody said something about staff spouses. Yeah, as hard as it can be for you guys to do your work, you're at least around each other. The husbands and wives, right? Your spouses are a step removed. So the challenge becomes, how do I bring them in closer? Can we have events where all of us get to be together? Because it's not fair. I grew up in a pastor's house. I'm a pastor's kid, and I would watch my mom not even be able to deal with things directly. She'd hear about somebody being a knucklehead in the church, or she's over here just getting madder about it, right? Or, people are picking on my husband, and what do I do about it? We have to find ways to engage and be around each other safely. So I would look for opportunities to pull spouses in as much as possible.
Paul, this is Clark. Just to affirm here that it's okay for pastors to say, "Hey, I need some help." We are so good at trying to take care of everybody else, but sometimes we don't take care of ourselves.
Yep.
And I just that isolation and everything you talked about is so important that we deal with that and that we reach out to somebody. So I appreciate what you had to say today.
Yeah, and it's okay to say I'm lonely. Pastoring is lonely work. Christian leadership is lonely work. It's okay to say I'm lonely. I need a friend. I need more time with someone. Yep. Thanks, Clark.
Clark, thank you so much, Dr. Paul. Your time with us today has been a gift, and we really appreciate it. Is there a way that we could stay in touch with you or with what Hope International University is doing?
Yeah, 2 ways. One, you can email me directly at palexander@hiu.edu. And then the second way, if he's still on the call, so he's still there, is through Joe Grana. Joe Grana is a legend. He's the man at Hope. He's on his iPhone. You can see him down in the corner of his screen. But Joe handles church relations. So you can reach out to Joe Grana as well.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.